Not a sound.
I grabbed the wrist of the most dangerous man in Naples 3 seconds before he walked in on his fiancée with another man. Not just any man. His cousin.
Not a sound.
His blood. The man he'd trusted for 18 years. And they weren't just sleeping together. They were planning to poison him in 5 days. I'm Helena Palmer. I'm a Black American housemaid. And I just gambled my life on stopping a murder I was never supposed to know about. The crazy part? Saving his life was the easy part. Because now I'm standing in his study at midnight watching Luciano Vittorio. A man who's killed for less. The same man whom I've seen smile at funerals but never at weddings. Stare at me like I'm either his salvation or his next problem. His team just recorded everything. The affair. The murder plot. The €100 million insurance scam. We have 5 days until New Year's Eve. 5 days to catch 2 snakes who think I'm nobody. But here's what they don't know. I've been documenting their plan for 2 weeks. Every conversation. Every detail. Every piece of evidence that proves the woman he almost married wants him dead. And then he asked me something that changed everything. Tell me about yourself, Helena. And don't call me sir. My name is Luciano. That's when I knew. This wasn't just about saving his life anymore. This was about to get dangerous in ways I never saw coming. But before I tell you how a murder conspiracy became the most impossible love story of my life, let me ask you something. Have you ever had to choose between staying silent and doing the right thing, even when it could cost you everything? Have you ever felt invisible, like nobody sees you or values what you have to offer? That's exactly where I was 2 weeks before that garden. And if you've ever felt that way, like you're on the outside looking in, like your voice doesn't matter, then this story is for you. Because what I'm about to share isn't just about danger and passion. It's about finding your power when everyone calls you powerless. It's about love that sees you when the world looks right through you. If that resonates with you, hit that subscribe button. Because I share stories like this one. Stories about women who refuse to stay invisible, who choose courage over comfort, and who find love in the most unexpected places. And trust me, you'll want to be here for every single one. Now let me take you back to where this really started. 2 weeks before I grabbed Luciano in that snow-covered garden, I was cleaning his upstairs study, the one his fiancée thought was locked. But working in a house this size, you learn quickly that there are always spare keys, always ways to access forgotten corners where secrets hide. The walls in these old Italian villas are thick as fortress stones, but the ventilation system? Carries sound like whispered confessions in a church. And what I heard that day made my blood run cold. 3 more weeks. Bianca's voice was sharp, calculating. Nothing like the sweet tone she used with Luciano. The insurance policy updates on January 1st. Double indemnity. €100 million, Dante. 100 million and we can finally be together. Dante's response was eager. Hungry. And you're sure the plan will work? Your fiancé survived assassination attempts from rival families. Because he trusts me, she interrupted. I could hear the smile in her voice. He doesn't love me, hasn't touched me in over a year, but he trusts me. That's his weakness. On New Year's Eve during the family celebration, I'll put oleander in his prosecco. Just enough. It'll look like a heart attack. The family doctor is paid off, and you'll be on a plane to Sicily with a perfect alibi. My hands froze. My heart hammered so hard I thought they'd hear it through the walls. And the maid? Dante asked. The Black American girl. She's always watching. What if? Bianca's laugh cut him off. Pulled. Dismissive. Helena. She's nobody. An immigrant desperate for work. Even if she suspected something, who would believe her over us? She'd be deported before she could finish an accusation. Nobody. That word echoed in my head for 2 weeks. I'd come to Italy to escape violence. To find peace after watching my childhood friend Marcus die on a DC street with a cop's bullet in his chest. I'd crossed an ocean for a fresh start, for a place where maybe I could forget the sound of gunshots and blood on asphalt. Instead, I'd walked straight into another murder waiting to happen. But this time I could stop it. So I documented everything in a small notebook hidden in my room. Dates. Conversations. The doctor's name. Insurance policy details. Every piece of evidence I could gather while playing the invisible servant who smiled and kept her mouth shut. Until tonight. Until I heard that Maserati engine die in the driveway 3 hours early. Until I saw Luciano step out, saw his hand drift toward his hip. toward the gun I'd seen him check 100 times in 6 months. 3 steps from the front door. 3 steps from the bedroom window where Bianca's breathless laughter spilled into winter air. Intimate, familiar, wrapped around a voice I knew too well. Cinque giorni tesoro mio. 5 days, my darling. Dante Romano. His cousin. His most trusted capo for 18 years. Luciano's jaw clenched in the moonlight. Rage flooded his body like electricity. He was going to storm in there and kill them both with his bare hands. But if he did, they'd win. So I stepped out of the shadows and grabbed his wrist. Not a sound, I whispered, my heart hammering. He froze. This man, Luciano Vittorio, the most feared don in Naples, who made grown soldiers tremble with a glance, froze because a housemaid he barely noticed had the audacity to touch him. To command him. His dark eyes found mine and I saw murder there. But also confusion. And maybe the tiniest flicker of curiosity. I didn't let go. I pulled him backward toward the side garden where shadows were thicker and snow would muffle our footsteps. He could have snapped my arm. Could have put a bullet in me. But he didn't. He listened. If you go in there now, I breathed, they win. Trust me. Talk, he commanded, his voice a deadly whisper. And this better be good or you're fired for touching me. I'd rehearsed this moment 100 times while scrubbing floors and serving dinner, smiling at the woman planning to murder the man in front of me. But now my carefully prepared words scattered like leaves in the wind. I looked up at him, Luciano Vittorio. 36. Ruthless. Brilliant. Deadly. And from 6 months of being invisible in his home, desperately, achingly lonely. Your fiancée isn't just cheating on you, I began, my American accent thick with emotion. She's planning to kill you. The words hung between us like a death sentence. Mafia bosses don't give away their feelings easily, but I saw his pupils dilate. Saw his breathing shift, become more controlled. More dangerous. Explain, he said. One word. Absolute authority. Everything. Now. So I did. I told him about the heating vent. About 2 weeks of listening. About the oleander poison and the paid-off doctor. About the insurance policy and Dante's perfect alibi. About how they called me nobody. He pulled out his phone. Salvatore, he said quietly. I need you at my location. Bring the team and recording equipment. Because I'm about to catch a snake and I want evidence before I cut off its head. He ended the call and looked at me. Really looked at me for the first time since I'd started working in his home. Why didn't you come to me sooner? He asked. I met his gaze steadily. Because I needed proof. And because I needed to know if you were worth saving. The audacity of that statement should have gotten me killed. Something flickered behind his eyes. Surprise maybe. Or respect. Am I? He asked. I'd watched him for 6 months. Watched how he visited his grandmother's grave every Sunday, even exhausted. Watched how he anonymously donated to the children's hospital. Watched how he protected his staff when they made mistakes. How he carried the weight of his empire with a loneliness that made my heart ache. Yes, I said quietly. I think you're worth saving. Before he could respond, headlights swept across the garden. His team had arrived. 4 men who moved like shadows, professional and silent. What's the play? One of them asked, eyes cutting to me with obvious suspicion. A smile played at Luciano's lips, but it didn't reach his eyes. We're going to give my dear fiancée exactly what she wants. We're going to let her think her plan is working. He turned back toward the house with deadly purpose. But first, he said, his voice cold enough to freeze blood, I need to see it for myself. I need to see the man she chose over me. My heart raced as I followed him and his men through the servants' entrance. Up the back staircase where I knew every creaking board, every squeaky hinge. I led them to a storage closet adjacent to the master bedroom, rarely used, but with a connecting door that gave a perfect view. Luciano picked the lock in seconds, and then we were crammed in the darkness, 5 of us breathing as quietly as possible. And there, in the bed Luciano had bought for his fiancée as an anniversary present, was Bianca. And straddling her, his face buried in her neck, was Dante Romano. I watched Luciano's face in the darkness and saw something break behind his eyes. Something fundamental and irreparable. This wasn't just betrayal. This was the destruction of everything he'd believed about loyalty, about family, about trust. Without thinking, I reached out and touched his hand. Just a brief contact. A reminder that he wasn't alone in this moment of devastation. His fingers twitched. Then so briefly I might have imagined it, they squeezed mine in acknowledgement. We stayed there for 20 minutes while Salvatore recorded everything. Every whispered promise. Every detail of their murder plot repeated in the hazy afterglow of their passion. Just 5 more days, Bianca murmured. Can you wait 5 more days, my love? I've waited 2 years, Dante replied. What's 5 more days to be free of him? To have you, the money and control of the organization. When we finally filed out of that closet and made our way back to Luciano's study, I felt like I'd aged a decade. But the real work was just beginning. Because now we had 5 days to plan the perfect trap. 5 days to gather evidence that would hold up in court. 5 days for me to pretend everything was normal while serving breakfast to a woman who called me nobody, and planned murder between sips of espresso. And 5 days for something unexpected to grow between a mafia boss and the maid who saved his life. Something dangerous. Something impossible. Something that felt inevitably, terrifyingly like falling in love. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me take you back to that first night in the study, when Luciano Vittorio looked at me with those dark, devastating eyes and asked me a question that would change everything. Tell me about yourself, Helena. And don't call me sir every sentence. My name is Luciano. His name felt strange on my tongue. Intimate. Like crossing a line I couldn't uncross. But I'd already crossed so many lines tonight. What was one more? The study smelled like old leather and expensive whiskey, masculine and imposing in a way that made me acutely aware of how out of place I was. Luciano's men filed out one by one after receiving their orders, each giving me a look that ranged from curiosity to outright suspicion. I couldn't blame them. In their world, people who stuck their necks out usually had an angle. Salvatore paused at the door, his question hanging in the air like smoke. And the girl. Luciano didn't even glance my way. She saved my life. She stays close. I want her protected. Protected. The word sent a strange thrill through me that I absolutely should not have been feeling. This man was dangerous. A criminal. Someone I should fear, not find fascinating. Yet here I was, my pulse racing for entirely different reasons than terror. After they left, silence fell over the study like a heavy blanket. I stood by the bookshelf trying to make myself invisible out of habit, but Luciano gestured to one of the leather chairs across from his desk. Sit, he said. I'm staff, sir. I shouldn't. Sit. The command in his voice left no room for argument. I perched on the edge of the chair like a bird ready for flight. He moved to pour himself a whiskey, then stopped, staring at the amber liquid like it might contain poison. After a moment he set it down untasted and pulled out a bottle of water instead. He handed one to me, took one for himself. Tell me about yourself, he said, settling into his chair with the kind of grace that came from absolute confidence. And don't call me sir every sentence. My name is Luciano. I couldn't possibly, I wanted to say. You're the Don. I'm the help. We don't use first names. But then I remembered, I'd just grabbed this man's wrist in the dark and ordered him to be quiet. I'd accused his fiancée of murder. I'd let him through his own house like I owned it. We were way past formalities. Okay, Luciano. His name felt dangerous on my tongue, intimate in a way that made heat crawl up my neck. I'm from D.C., Washington, D.C. I came to Italy 3 years ago to study international business at the University of Florence. And instead you're cleaning my house. He studied me with those dark eyes that seemed to see through every wall I'd ever built. Why? I took a sip of water, buying time. How much did I tell him? How much did I trust this man whose empire was built on violence? But he'd just chosen evidence over execution. He'd called the police instead of his soldiers. Maybe, just maybe, he was exactly who I'd hoped he was when I decided to save him. My student visa was running out, I said carefully. I needed a work sponsor. Your fiancé, the word tasted bitter now. Bianca hired me 6 months ago. The pay was good. The visa sponsorship was legitimate. I thought it was a blessing. And instead you walked into a conspiracy. Yes. He was quiet for a long moment, just watching me. I felt exposed under that gaze, like he could peel back every layer of my carefully constructed persona and see the scared girl underneath. The one who'd fled America with blood on her conscience and grief in her suitcase. You could have stayed quiet, he finally said. Could have kept your head down, collected your pay, let nature take its course. Why risk yourself for a stranger? The question I'd asked myself 100 times over the past 2 weeks. Because it was wrong, I said quietly. And I couldn't live with myself if I let it happen. My mother always said that silence in the face of evil makes you complicit. My voice cracked slightly. I've been complicit before. I won't be again. Something shifted in his expression. Not softening, men like Luciano Vittorio didn't soften. But warming like ice beginning to thaw at the edges. Your mother sounds like a wise woman. She was. She passed away 2 years ago. I'm sorry. We sat in companionable silence for a moment, two strangers bound together by secrets and circumstances, trying to navigate this impossible situation. What happens now? Finally asked. He leaned back in his chair and I caught a glimpse of the strategist beneath the heartbreak. How we plan. We gather evidence. And on New Year's Eve when my dear fiancée thinks she's about to become a wealthy widow, we spring the trap. His smile was cold enough to frost the windows. Predatory. Beautiful in a terrible way. But until then, he continued, his eyes finding mine, you need to act completely normal. Can you do that? I nodded. I've been doing it for 2 weeks. This is different. Now I'm home. Now you'll see me every day and you'll have to pretend you don't know what you know. You'll have to serve her dinner, press her clothes, smile and nod while she plans my death. The intensity in his voice sent shivers down my spine. Can you do that, Helena? The way he said my name, slow, deliberate, like he was tasting each syllable, made something flutter in my chest. Yes, I said, meeting his eyes. I can do that. Good. He stood, signaling the end of our conversation. It's late. Get some rest. Tomorrow, everything continues as normal. I rose and moved toward the door but paused with my hand on the handle. Luciano. Yes. I'm sorry. About your fiancé. About your cousin. I'm sorry you're going through this. For a long moment he didn't respond. Then so quietly I almost didn't hear it. So am I. I slipped out into the hallway, my heart still racing, and made my way to the small room I occupied in the staff quarters. As I undressed and climbed into bed, I replayed the entire night in my head. Her. The garden. The closet. That moment when his fingers squeezed mine in the darkness. I'd come to Italy looking for peace, for a fresh start, for some way to outrun the violence that had defined my life in DC. Instead, I'd walked straight into a murder conspiracy involving the Mafia. But as I drifted off to sleep, I couldn't shake the memory of Luciano's eyes when he'd looked at me in his study. Like he was seeing me for the first time. Really seeing me. And God help me, I liked being seen. The next morning arrived too soon, dragging me from dreams I didn't want to examine too closely. I dressed in my uniform, pinned my hair back, and went downstairs to begin my duties like nothing had changed. But everything had changed. Bianca was already at the breakfast table when I entered the dining room, looking flawless in a cream silk blouse and tailored pants. Her diamond earrings caught the morning light, winking like knowing secrets. Helena, she said without looking up from her phone. I'll need you to pick up my dry cleaning this afternoon. And the caterer needs the final head count for the New Year's Eve party by tomorrow. Of course, ma'am, I replied, keeping my voice neutral, my expression pleasant. My stomach churned. The New Year's Eve party. The party where she planned to poison the man she'd promised to marry. I poured her coffee, black, no sugar, the way she liked it, and set it down with steady hands. She didn't even acknowledge me. To her, I was furniture. A nobody. An immigrant desperate for work. If only she knew that the nobody had just spent the night plotting her downfall with the man she was planning to murder. The front door opened and Luciano walked in. My breath caught despite myself. He looked different in the morning light. Still dangerous, still powerful, but there was a weariness around his eyes that hadn't been there before. The weight of betrayal settling into his bones. Darling. Bianca rose from her chair, all smiles and affection. She crossed to him and kissed his cheek. You're home early. I thought you had meetings all morning. Cancelled, he said smoothly, returning her kiss with the kind of practiced ease that made my chest ache. How many times had he kissed her, believing it meant something? His eyes found mine over her shoulder. Just for a second. A flash of something I couldn't quite name. Then he looked away and I was invisible again. Helena, bring Mr. Vittorio his usual breakfast, Bianca said, settling back into her chair. Yes, ma'am. I retreated to the kitchen, my hands shaking as I prepared his espresso and cornetto. This was going to be harder than I'd thought. Watching them together. Watching her play the devoted fiancé while planning his death. Watching him play along pretending he didn't know. When I returned with his breakfast, they were discussing the New Year's Eve party. Guest list. Decorations. The champagne selection. I was thinking we should do the midnight toast on the terrace, Bianca said, her hand resting on Luciano's arm with casual intimacy. With the fireworks over the bay, it'll be magical. Whatever you want, amore, he replied. The endearment sounded hollow to my ears, but Bianca preened under it. I set down his breakfast and turned to leave, but his voice stopped me. Helena. I froze. Yes, sir. The espresso you made yesterday. It was excellent. Better than usual. My heart stuttered. Yesterday. Before I'd grabbed his wrist in the garden. Before I'd turned his world upside down. Thank you, sir, I managed. Our eyes met for half a second. In that brief glance, I saw everything he couldn't say. Thank you for saving my life. Thank you for not staying silent. Thank you for seeing me as more than a monster. Then the moment passed and I was just the maid again. The day crawled by with agonizing slowness. I ran Bianca's errands, picked up her dry cleaning, confirmed details with the caterer. All while knowing that the woman who smiled and chatted on the phone about flower arrangements was planning cold-blooded murder. That evening, after Bianca had gone to bed and the villa was quiet, I found myself drawn to Luciano's study. I knew I shouldn't. Knew it crossed every professional boundary. But something pulled me there anyway. The door was open. He sat at his desk, papers spread before him, a glass of water at his elbow. No whiskey tonight. He looked up when I appeared in the doorway. Can't sleep, he asked. No. You. No. I hesitated, then stepped inside. I keep thinking about her. About how she looked at breakfast. So normal. So loving. She's good at it, he said. The performance. I should have seen through it. Should have known. How could you have known? She's been playing this role for how long? 3 years. We've been engaged for 3 years. He laughed, but there was no humor in it. My grandmother arranged it before she died. Wanted me to have family. To not be alone. The loneliness in his voice cracked something open in my chest. You're not alone, I said softly. Not anymore. He looked at me, then really looked at me, and the air between us suddenly felt charged. Electric. Helena. Whatever he was going to say was cut off by his phone ringing. He answered it, his expression shifting back to business. I took it as my cue to leave. But as I walked back to my room, I couldn't shake the feeling that something had started tonight. Something dangerous and impossible and utterly inevitable. 4 more days until New Year's Eve. 4 more days of pretending. 4 more days until everything either fell apart or came together. I just had to make it through without losing my mind. Or my heart. The next morning I woke to find Salvatore waiting in the kitchen. He didn't say anything at first, just watched me with those calculating eyes while I started the coffee. Finally he spoke. The cameras go in today. While they're both out. My hands stilled on the espresso machine. Both. Bianca has a spa appointment. Dante's meeting the Don for lunch. Neutral ground, public place. They won't suspect. He paused. You'll need to help. You know the house better than anyone. Of course I did. 6 months of cleaning every corner, every hidden space. I knew where the heating vents connected, where the sight lines were best, where someone could hide and see everything. What do you need me to do? He almost smiled. Almost. Show my tech team the good spots. Then make yourself scarce. 3 hours later, I was leading 2 men who looked like they could kill me with their pinkies through the villa's 2nd floor. They worked with silent efficiency, installing tiny cameras in air vents, behind picture frames, inside decorative sconces. In the sitting room where I'd first heard Bianca and Dante planning. In the hallways they'd have to cross. Everywhere except the bedrooms and bathrooms. Even Luciano had limits. This one, I said, pointing to a vent in the upper hallway, carries sound from the master bedroom to the study below. One of the tech guys raised an eyebrow. You've been paying attention. It's my job to be invisible, I said quietly. You notice things when no one thinks you're listening. By the time Bianca returned from her spa day, glowing and relaxed, every camera was hidden and transmitting to a monitoring station Salvatore had set up in the wine cellar. A room Bianca never visited because she claimed the stone stairs hurt her ankles and heels. That night I found myself back in Luciano's study. I told myself I was just checking if he needed anything. But the truth was I couldn't stay away. He was standing by the window, hands in his pockets, staring out at the gardens where I'd stopped him 2 nights ago. The moonlight cast shadows across his face, making him look like something carved from marble. Beautiful and cold and utterly unreachable. "They're installed," I said from the doorway. He turned and the coldness melted slightly when he saw me. "Salvatore told me. He said you were helpful. I know this house." "Yes." He moved toward his desk where a laptop sat open. "Come here. I want to show you something." I shouldn't have. Should have kept my professional distance. But I crossed the room and stood beside him as he pulled up the monitoring software. The screen split into multiple feeds. The sitting room, the hallways, the study. All empty now, but soon they'd capture everything. "When they talk," he said, his voice low, "when they plan, we'll have it all. Video. Audio. Everything we need to bury them." The word bury sent a chill through me, but not because I feared for Bianca and Dante. Because of how much I wanted to see them pay for what they'd done to this man. When had I started caring so much? "Luciano," I said carefully, "what happens after?" "After New Year's Eve." He was quiet for a long moment. Then, "I don't know. I've spent my whole life knowing exactly what comes next. Every move planned, every contingency covered. But this." He gestured at the screens. "I have no idea what comes after watching your world burn." The vulnerability in his voice made me brave. I reached out and touched his arm the same way I had in the garden. "Just contact. Just connection. You'll rebuild," I said softly. "Maybe something better." His hand covered mine, warm and solid. "Is that what you did? Rebuilt after whatever sent you running to Italy?" I should have pulled away. Should have deflected. But something about the darkness, the intimacy of standing in his study while the rest of the house slept, made me honest. "I witnessed a murder," I said, the words spilling out before I could stop them. "Back in DC. My childhood friend Marcus. We were walking home from the library and the police pulled up. They said he matched a description. He reached for his wallet to show ID and they shot him." Luciano's hand tightened on mine. "I testified at the grand jury. Told them exactly what I saw. That Marcus was unarmed, that he was complying, that there was no threat." My voice cracked. "They didn't indict. The officers walked free. And I couldn't stay in that city anymore. Couldn't walk those streets knowing his blood was on them and nobody cared." "So you ran." "So I ran," I agreed. "Came to Italy thinking I could escape violence. Instead I found myself in a mafia boss's house, watching another conspiracy unfold. Apparently I can't escape it. Or maybe," he said quietly, "you were meant to be here. To stop this one." I looked up at him and the expression on his face made my breath catch. He was looking at me like I was something precious. Something worth protecting. "Helena." The moment shattered as the laptop chimed. Movement on one of the cameras. We both turned to look. The sitting room feed showed Bianca entering, phone pressed to her ear. She glanced around furtively before speaking. Luciano reached over and turned up the audio. "Tomorrow night," Bianca was saying. "Yes, I'm sure. Luciano will be at the warehouse meeting until at least 11. We'll have ours." Dante's voice came through tinny but clear. "I'll bring the champagne. The real kind, not the poison version. We should celebrate early, tesoro. Our last days of sneaking around." My stomach turned as Bianca laughed. "4 more days. Just 4 more days and then it's all ours." Luciano's face had gone completely blank. But I felt the tension radiating from him like heat. The call ended. Bianca left the sitting room. The feed went quiet. "Tomorrow night," Luciano said, his voice devoid of emotion. "They're meeting here. In my home. While I'm supposedly at a meeting. You could cancel," I suggested. "Catch them in the act." "No." His jaw clenched. "I need to see it. Need to watch them together celebrating my death while I'm still alive. I need." He stopped, his hands curling into fists. I understood. He needed to kill the last part of himself that still believed in them. That still hoped this was somehow a misunderstanding. "I'll go with you," I said. "To the meeting. I'll make an excuse to Bianca. Say you need me to take notes or translate documents or whatever. That way when you come back early I'll be with you. Witness. He looked at me like I'd offered him something infinitely valuable. You do that. I told you. I won't be complicit in murder. That includes letting you face this alone. The air between us felt thick, charged with something I didn't want to name. He was still touching my hand. I was still standing close enough to feel his warmth. I should go, I whispered, but I didn't move. You should, he agreed, but his thumb traced a slow circle on my wrist right over my racing pulse. For a moment, just a heartbeat, I thought he might kiss me. Thought I might let him. Then reality crashed back. He was engaged. She was plotting to kill him. I was his maid. This was impossible on every level. I pulled my hand away and stepped back. Good night, Luciano. Good night, Helena. I fled before I could do something stupid. Like stay. The next day dragged by with agonizing slowness. Bianca was in an excellent mood, humming while she got ready for her evening. She wore a red dress that clung to every curve, diamonds at her throat, her hair perfectly styled. You look beautiful, ma'am, I said, because that's what good staff did. Thank you, Helena. She actually smiled at me. I'm feeling lucky tonight. Lucky. While planning to celebrate her fiancé's impending murder. The casual cruelty of it made me want to scream. At 6, Luciano emerged in one of his sharp suits. Helena, I'll need you to come with me. There are documents that need translating. Bianca barely glanced up from her phone. Take her. I'll be fine here. If only she knew. The warehouse meeting was real enough. Salvatore and 3 other men waiting to discuss shipping routes and legitimate business. But everyone knew it was theater. The real show would happen later. At 9:30, Luciano checked his watch. We should head back. Wrap this up tomorrow. Salvatore nodded, understanding in his eyes. The drive back to the villa was silent. I sat beside Luciano in the back seat, watching the lights of Naples flash past, my heart hammering against my ribs. Are you ready for this? He asked quietly. Are you? No. Honest. Raw. But I need to see it anyway. We pulled into the villa's side entrance at 10:15. The house was dark except for lights in the sitting room. Luciano moved through his own home like a ghost and I followed, both of us silent. Salvatore and his tech were already waiting in the wine cellar. The monitors glowed in the darkness, showing multiple angles of the sitting room. And there they were. Bianca and Dante. Champagne glasses in hand, wrapped around each other on the sofa where Luciano had sat with his grandmother countless times. To us, Dante said, raising his glass. And to freedom. To 100 million euros, Bianca corrected with a laugh. Let's be honest about our priorities. They drank. They kissed. And then Dante's hands started wandering and I had to look away. But Luciano didn't. He watched every second, his face a mask of stone, something dying behind his eyes with each passing moment. I reached out in the darkness and found his hand. Squeezed it. This time he held on like I was the only thing keeping him from drowning. After what felt like hours but was probably only 20 minutes, Bianca and Dante finally pulled apart, straightening their clothes. For more days, Dante said. Then the New Year's Eve party. The toast. And by dawn you'll be a widow and I'll be Dawn. And nobody will ever know, Bianca added. Perfect crime. They were wrong. As we knew. And we were going to make them pay. 3 days until New Year's Eve. I served breakfast like everything was normal. Smiled when Bianca complimented the fresh flowers. Nodded when she rattled off her endless to-do list for the party. Poured coffee with steady hands while my mind replayed last night's surveillance footage on an endless loop. Luciano barely looked at me during the meal, but I felt his awareness like a physical touch. We'd stood in that wine cellar for over an hour after Dante left, neither of us speaking, his hand gripping mine like a lifeline. When we'd finally emerged, he'd whispered a single word. Tomorrow. Tomorrow we'd talk. Tomorrow we'd plan the next move. Tomorrow felt like a lifetime away. Helena, Bianca's voice cut through my thoughts. Did you hear me? I need you to pick up my dress from the boutique. And stop by the jeweler. My bracelet should be ready. Of course, ma'am. As I turned to leave, Luciano's voice stopped me. Actually, I need Helena this afternoon. Document translations for the shipping contracts. Bianca's perfectly shaped eyebrows rose. Can't someone else do it? She's familiar with the terminology. His tone left no room for argument. I'll have her back by evening. The look Bianca gave me was calculating. Suspicious. For a terrifying moment I thought she knew. Thought somehow she'd figured out that the nobody maid had become the one person her fiancé trusted. Then she shrugged. Fine. But Helena, you'll need to run my errands tomorrow instead. Yes, ma'am. 2 hours later I found myself in Luciano's study, the door locked, surveillance monitors glowing in the corner. There are no shipping contracts, I said. No. He stood by the window, the afternoon light casting shadows across his face. But we need to talk, and I'm running out of excuses to have you alone without raising suspicion. My heart did something complicated in my chest. What happens after New Year's Eve? After she's arrested? Detective Ferrara owes me a favor. A big one. He'll be there in plain clothes with his team. When she makes her move, when she adds the poison, we'll have it all on camera and he'll make the arrest. He turned to face me. It ends legally. No bodies. No disappearances. Just justice. Your world doesn't usually work that way. No, he agreed. But maybe it's time it did. He moved closer and I found myself unable to step back. My grandmother, before she died, she made me promise something. She said, Luciano, you have your father's strength, but you have my heart. Don't lose it completely to this life. Find someone who reminds you that you're human. The air between us felt electric. Dangerous. I think she'd have liked you, he said softly. You remind me I'm human. Luciano. I know. You're my employee. I'm engaged. This is impossible. He reached up and tucked a loose strand of hair behind my ear, his fingers lingering. But when this is over, when Bianca is gone and Dante is arrested, you'll be free to leave. New visa sponsor. Better job. Whatever you want. What if I don't want to leave? The words escaped before I could stop them. His eyes darkened. Helena. A knock at the door made us spring apart like guilty teenagers. Salvatore's voice came through. Boss, Dante just arrived. Early. Luciano's expression shifted instantly from vulnerable to predatory. Show me. The monitors flickered to life. Dante in the foyer, being shown to the sitting room by another staff member. He looked relaxed. Confident. Like a man who had nothing to hide. He's testing you, I said. Seeing if you suspect anything. Let him look. Luciano's smile was cold. He'll see exactly what I want him to see. He turned to me. Stay here. Watch the monitors. If he says anything incriminating, record it. Then he was gone, leaving me alone with the screens and my racing heart. I watched Luciano enter the sitting room, embrace his cousin like nothing was wrong. Watched them pour drinks and settle into chairs, talking about business, about the New Year's Eve party, about futures that would never exist. I've been thinking, Dante said, swirling his whiskey. After you and Bianca marry, maybe it's time to expand. The shipping routes to Albania could be lucrative. After the wedding, Luciano agreed smoothly. First, let's get through the engagement party. Of course. And cousin. Dante's expression shifted to something almost concerned. You seem tired lately. Stressed. Everything okay? The audacity. The sheer balls of this man asking if his murder victim was stressed. Just wedding pressure, Luciano said with a laugh that sounded genuine even to my ears. Bianca has opinions about everything. Women. Dante grinned. Can't live with them, can't. Can't trust them. Luciano finished, and there was something sharp underneath the casual tone. Dante's smile flickered. I was going to say, can't understand them. But sure, trust is important too. They talked for another 20 minutes. Nothing incriminating. Nothing useful. But I could see the tension in Luciano's shoulders, the way his hand gripped his glass just a little too tight. When Dante finally left, Luciano didn't come back to the study immediately. I watched on the monitors as he stood alone in the sitting room, staring at the chair where his cousin had sat. Then in a sudden burst of violence he threw his glass against the wall. I was moving before I could think, racing down the hallway and bursting into the sitting room. He stood amid the shattered crystal, chest heaving, hands clenched into fists. Luciano. 18 years, he said, his voice raw. 18 years I've called him brother. Saved his life. Trusted him with mine. And he's been fucking my fiancée and planning my murder for 2 of them. I should have kept my distance. Should have stayed professional. Instead, I crossed to him and took his hands in mine, carefully uncurling his fists. "They're not worth this," I said fiercely. "Not worth your rage or your pain or a single second of your time. In 3 days they'll be in custody. In 3 months they'll be in prison. And you'll be free." "Free." He laughed bitterly. "I don't even know what that means anymore. It means choosing who you want to be instead of who your father made you. It means building something that doesn't require fear to function. It means—" "You," he interrupted, pulling me closer. "It means you, Helena. Somehow, in the middle of the worst betrayal of my life, I found you. And I don't deserve you, but I want." Whatever he was going to say was lost as his phone rang. He closed his eyes, took a breath, and answered. "Yes. Tonight? Fine. I'll be there." He hung up and looked at me with regret. "Emergency meeting. Real one this time. I have to go. I should get back to work anyway. Before Bianca notices." "Helena." He caught my hand as I turned to leave. "Tomorrow night. After Bianca goes to bed. Come to my study. Please. We need to talk about what happens after all this." I knew I should say no. Knew that every moment alone with him pulled me deeper into something I couldn't control. But I nodded anyway. Tomorrow night. That evening I helped Bianca prepare for a dinner with her friends. She was in an excellent mood, singing while I zipped her dress, chatting about the New Year's Eve party. "I can hardly wait," she said, admiring herself in the mirror. "It's going to be perfect. Absolutely perfect." "Yes, ma'am." "Oh, and Helena, I'll need you to work the party. Extra hands for serving. You don't mind, do you? Mind serving at the party where she planned to poison Luciano? Mind wearing a hidden camera and recording her murder attempt?" "Of course not, ma'am. I'm happy to help." "Good." She smiled at her reflection. "Who knows? This might be your last big event here. I'm thinking of hiring a new girl. Someone more experienced. The casual cruelty of it. Planning to fire me right after she murdered her fiancé, assuming I'd be deported before I could say anything. I understand, ma'am." After she left, I allowed myself one moment of pure rage. Bianca had no idea that the nobody she was planning to dispose of was going to be her downfall. The next night I waited until midnight before slipping through the dark hallways to Luciano's study. He was waiting, 2 glasses of water already poured. "I've been thinking," he said without preamble, "about what I want. Who I want to be when this is over. And not my father. Not the Don who ruled through fear. Someone better. Someone who deserves." He stopped, started again. "After New Year's Eve, after the arrest, I'm going to restructure everything. Legitimate businesses only. No more protection rackets, no more illegal operations. It'll take time, but it's possible. That's a brave choice. It's a necessary one." He moved closer. "Because I want a life that someone like you could be part of. And you'd never stay with a criminal." My breath caught. "Luciano. I'm not asking you to decide now. I'm just telling you that when Bianca is gone, when I'm free, I'm going to ask you properly. Court you the right way. Give you all the reasons why you should stay." "What if I already have reasons?" The words escaped before I could stop them. His eyes darkened with something that made heat pool in my stomach. "Do you?" I should have lied. Should have protected us both. Instead I stepped closer. "Yes." The word hung between us, heavy with promise and impossibility. He raised his hand to my face, thumb tracing my cheekbone with devastating gentleness. 2 more days, he whispered. Just 2 more days of pretending and then... The door burst open. We jumped apart as Salvatore entered, his expression grim. "Boss, we have a problem. The doctor just called. Wants to change the arrangement. Says the risk is too high." Luciano's face went cold. "Handle it." "Already did. But thought you should know, they're getting nervous." After Salvatore left, the moment was broken. The intimacy shattered. We were back to being the Don and his maid, conspirators against a common enemy. "You should go," Luciano said quietly. "Before someone notices you're gone." I nodded and moved toward the door. But I paused at the threshold. 2 more days, I said. "And then we see who we can be." 2 more days, he agreed. As I walked back to my room, I couldn't shake the feeling that everything was about to change. For better or worse, New Year's Eve would decide our fate. Both of us. New Year's Eve arrived with crystalline perfection. The kind of day that made you believe in new beginnings and fresh starts, even when you knew better. I woke before dawn, my heart already racing. Today. Everything happened today. The villa transformed throughout the morning. White orchids arrived by the hundreds. Ice sculptures took shape in the grand hall. Caterers moved through the kitchen like a well-oiled machine. And through it all, Bianca floated like a queen preparing for her coronation, utterly unaware she was actually preparing for her arrest. I caught glimpses of Luciano throughout the day, but we didn't speak. Couldn't risk it. Not when Dante had arrived early to help with preparations, hovering around Luciano like a concerned cousin instead of a would-be murderer. At 4 o'clock, Salvatore found me in the linen closet where I was counting napkins. "The camera button," he said quietly, pressing the small device into my palm. "Pin it to your collar. Make sure it's centered. We need clear footage of everything." I nodded, my throat tight. "Detective Ferrara and his team are already here. 5 officers in plain clothes mixed in with the guests. When she makes her move, we move." He paused. "You did good, Helena. The Don knows it. We all do. I just don't want anyone to die." "Nobody's dying tonight," he said with certainty. "Except maybe their freedom." At 6 I changed into my formal serving uniform. Black dress, white collar, sensible shoes. My hands trembled as I pinned the camera button in place. Such a tiny thing to hold so much weight. I studied my reflection. On the surface I looked like what I was supposed to be. Invisible help, there to serve and then disappear. But underneath I was the key to bringing down a murder conspiracy. God, I hoped we'd thought of everything. The guests started arriving at 7. I moved through the crowd with my tray of champagne, the camera capturing faces, conversations, the elaborate theater of wealth and power. I spotted Detective Ferrara near the terrace doors, dressed in an expensive suit, laughing with other guests like he belonged. Bianca looked stunning in a white designer gown that probably cost more than I made in a year. She greeted guests with perfect grace, her hand resting possessively on Luciano's arm whenever he was near. I wanted to scream at everyone that she was a monster, that the woman they were complimenting was planning murder. But I kept my expression neutral, my steps measured, my role intact. At 8:30 Luciano arrived in the main hall, and the room seemed to shift toward him like planets orbiting the sun. He wore a black suit that fit him like a weapon, his presence commanding every eye. When his gaze found mine across the room, the connection was electric, devastating. 2 more hours. Just 2 more hours. I served canapés, poured champagne, smiled at guests who looked through me like I was furniture. And all the while the camera recorded everything. At 10 I saw Dante slip away from the main party. My pulse spiked. The monitors would catch where he went, but I had an advantage. I knew this house. I found an excuse to check the kitchen and slipped out the service entrance. The hallway that led to Dante's private rooms was empty. I pressed myself into a shadowed alcove and watched as he disappeared into his quarters. 3 minutes later he emerged with a small vial in his palm. The oleander. My heart hammered as he tucked it into his jacket pocket and headed back toward the party. I waited until he was gone, then made my way to Luciano's study where I knew Salvatore would be monitoring. "He has the poison," I said, bursting in. Salvatore's expression darkened. "It's almost time. Almost time." The words felt like a death knell and a salvation all at once. I returned to the party, forcing myself to breathe normally, to move calmly, to not show the terror clawing at my throat. At 11:30 the energy in the room shifted. Guests began gravitating toward the main hall where a small stage had been set up. Bianca called for attention, her voice carrying perfectly over the crowd. "Thank you all for coming tonight," she began, radiant and deadly. "New Year's Eve has always been special to the Vittorio family. A time for new beginnings. For celebrating what we have and looking forward to what's coming." She gestured for Luciano to join her. He moved through the crowd with predatory grace, climbing the 3 steps to stand beside her. My hands were shaking so badly I had to set down my tray. Bianca personally poured 2 glasses of Prosecco from a special bottle she'd opened herself. I watched, my camera recording every movement as she reached into the folds of her dress. The vial. She was doing it. Right now. In front of 400 people. Her hand moved over Luciano's glass, quick and practiced. A few drops. Barely visible. Then she pocketed the vial and smiled. But Salvatore was ready. I saw him move through the crowd, smooth as silk, accidentally, bumping into a guest who stumbled into Bianca. The glasses jostled, switched positions in the choreographed chaos. When everything settled, Luciano held a different glass. The poisoned one was now in Salvatore's protected hand. Bianca didn't notice. She was too focused on her performance. To family, she said, raising her glass. To love. To the future we're building together. To family, Luciano echoed. But he didn't drink. That he spoke. Actually, before we toast, I have something to say. Bianca's smile flickered. Darling, maybe after? No. His voice cut through the room like a blade. Now. The temperature seemed to drop 10 degrees. You talk about family, Bianca. About love. About the future. He turned to face her fully. Tell me, amore, what's in this glass you just handed me? The room went silent. 400 people holding their breath. Champagne, she said, but her voice wavered. Are you feeling well? Maybe you should sit. Salvatore, Luciano called. Test it. I watched Bianca's face drain of color as Salvatore stepped forward with a field test kit. He dipped a strip into the Prosecco, waited. The strip turned black. Cardiac glycosides, Salvatore announced. Oleander. Lethal dose. The room erupted. Gasps. Shouts. People backing away from Bianca like she was radioactive. You're insane. Bianca hissed. I don't know what kind of game. No games, Luciano said coldly. Just truth. He gestured and suddenly the wall behind them illuminated. A projection screen descended. And the video began to play. Bianca and Dante in bed. Their voices planning Luciano's death. Financial records showing embezzlement. The doctor's confession. Dante preparing the poison. Bianca practicing her grieving widow performance in the mirror. Every damning detail. Every betrayal. All of it displayed for 400 witnesses. I watched Bianca's perfect facade crumble. Watched Dante try to run, only to be blocked by Salvatore's men. Then Detective Ferrara stepped forward with his team, badges gleaming. Bianca Castellano, Dante Romano, you're under arrest for conspiracy to commit murder, attempted murder, fraud, and embezzlement. The handcuffs clicked into place. Bianca screamed, fighting the officers. Dante stayed silent, his eyes locked on Luciano with pure hatred. As they were led away through 400 shocked guests, the room remained frozen. Then slowly applause began. Because Luciano had chosen justice over violence. Had respected law even as a don. Had proven that strength wasn't brutality, it was control. But I barely heard it. I was watching Luciano, seeing the devastation behind his cold mask, and my heart broke for him. When the police were gone, when the guests began filtering out with whispered conversations and backward glances, when the caterers cleaned up and the villa fell quiet, I found him in his study. He stood by the window staring at nothing, his shoulders carrying the weight of a world that had just burned to ashes. Luciano, I said softly. He turned and the vulnerability in his eyes took my breath away. It's done, he said. It's over. Yes. I should feel something. Vindication. Satisfaction. But I just feel empty. I crossed to him, closing the distance between us. You lost people you trusted. It's okay to grieve that. She was going to kill me. He said it like he still couldn't quite believe it. Smile while I died. And Dante, my cousin, my brother. I know. Why did you save me, Helena? The question was raw, desperate. Really? You could have walked away. Because when I look at you, I don't see a mafia boss or a criminal or whatever label people want to put on you. I reached up, cupping his face in my hands. I see a man who visits his grandmother's grave every Sunday. Who protects people weaker than himself. Who chose justice over revenge. I see someone worth saving. Helena. The kiss happened like gravity. Inevitable. Necessary. His lips met mine with a gentleness that contradicted everything I knew about him. A softness reserved only for this moment, only for me. I melted into him, my hands sliding up his chest to his shoulders. He pulled me closer, his fingers threading through my hair, and for the first time in weeks the tension bled out of both of us. When we finally broke apart, both breathing hard, he rested his forehead against mine. Stay, he said. Not as my employee. As my partner. My equal. I know it's fast, I know it's crazy, but... Yes, I interrupted. Yes, I'll stay. Because sometimes salvation comes from the most unexpected places. Sometimes it comes in the form of a brave woman who refuses to stay quiet. And sometimes in the ashes of betrayal, something beautiful can grow. This was our beginning. Finally our beginning. 3 months later, I sat in a Naples courtroom wearing a navy dress that Luciano had insisted on buying me. Not as his employee anymore. Those days were behind us. But as the woman who'd saved his life and somehow, impossibly, captured his heart. The trial had become a media sensation. Headlines screamed about the beautiful socialite and the trusted cousin who'd conspired to murder one of Naples' most powerful men. Cameras followed us everywhere. Reporters shouted questions. The whole world wanted to know our story. But the only story that mattered was the one told in that courtroom. The prosecution presented our evidence with devastating precision. The video footage of Bianca and Dante in bed, planning Luciano's death. The financial records showing 12 million euros embezzled. Dr. Lombardi's testimony about the bribe. The chemical analysis of the oleander extract. The footage from New Year's Eve showing Bianca adding poison to Luciano's glass. It was overwhelming. Irrefutable. Damning. Bianca's lawyers tried everything. They claimed coercion. Mental illness. Abuse. They painted Luciano as a monster who'd driven her to desperation. They attacked my credibility, calling me a gold digger who'd fabricated evidence to eliminate competition for Luciano's affection. That last part stung even though I knew it was a desperate defense strategy. When they called me to the stand, my hands were shaking. But the moment I saw Luciano in the gallery, his eyes steady on mine, I found my strength. "Miss Palmer," the defense attorney said with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "You were sleeping with Mr. Vittorio while he was still engaged to Miss Castellano, weren't you?" "No," I said firmly. "I never touched Luciano Vittorio inappropriately until after she was arrested." "But you wanted to. You had feelings for him." "Objection," the prosecutor called. "Relevance." "Your Honor, this goes to motive. Miss Palmer had every reason to frame my client." "Overruled." "But get to the point, counselor." The defense attorney turned back to me. "You fabricated this entire conspiracy to eliminate your romantic rival, didn't you?" I met his eyes. "I saved a man's life because it was right. Not for money. Not for romance. Because standing silent in the face of murder makes you complicit." I paused. "I've been complicit before. I wasn't going to be again." Something shifted in the jury's faces. They believed me. The defense attorney tried a few more angles, but nothing stuck. The evidence was too strong. The truth too clear. When Bianca took the stand, she played the victim beautifully. Tears streaming down her face, voice breaking as she talked about how controlling Luciano was, how frightened she'd been. But then the prosecution played the video of her practicing her grieving widow face in the mirror. Showed her laughing about Luciano's impending death. Let the jury hear her casual cruelty. The tears dried up real fast. Dante refused to testify. Just sat there stone-faced while his lawyer argued that the surveillance was illegal, the evidence fabricated, everything is set up. But we had the warrant. We had the detective's testimony. We had 400 witnesses from New Year's Eve. The jury deliberated for 6 hours. I spent them in the courthouse hallway, Luciano's hand gripping mine, both of us barely breathing. When they called us back in, my heart was trying to escape my chest. On the count of conspiracy to commit murder, how do you find? Guilty. On the count of attempted murder? Guilty. 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 Guilty on all counts. Bianca screamed. Actually screamed, fighting the bailiffs as they held her back. Dante just sat there, his face blank like he'd already checked out of his own life. 2 weeks later, sentencing arrived. The judge was a severe woman in her 60s who looked at Bianca and Dante with absolute disgust. "You conspired to murder a man for financial gain," she said. "You corrupted medical professionals. You showed no remorse. You saw a human being as nothing more than an obstacle to wealth." She turned to Bianca. 30 years to life. Eligible for parole in 25. Then to Dante. 45 years to life. No parole eligibility due to the embezzlement charges and your position of trust. As they were led away, Bianca's eyes found mine in the gallery. The hatred there was palpable. Pure. She blamed me for everything. Good. She should. Outside the courthouse, media swarmed. Luciano read a prepared statement about justice being served, about choosing the legal path over violence, about new beginnings. But when a reporter shouted, "Mr. Vittorio, what's your relationship with Helena Palmer?" he didn't hesitate. "She's the woman who saved my life. And if she'll have me, she'll be my wife." The reporters went crazy. Cameras flashed. Questions exploded. But I only saw him. This man who just proposed to me in front of the entire world. Was that a proposal? I asked when we finally escaped to his car. Terrible timing? The worst. Is that a no? I kissed him instead of answering, and his arms came around me like I was the most precious thing he'd ever held. "Ask me properly later," I whispered against his lips. "Somewhere private. Somewhere that's just ours." "I will," he promised. "I'll ask you properly and I'll spend the rest of my life making sure you never regret saying yes." The next 6 months were a whirlwind of change. Luciano kept his word about restructuring his empire. The illegal operations were systematically dismantled. Protection rackets ended. Gambling dens closed. Smuggling routes shut down. It cost him. Revenue dropped 60% initially. 40% of his organization walked away, unable or unwilling to adapt to legitimate business. But the ones who stayed built something better. Legal construction contracts. A shipping company that actually followed regulations. Hotels that operated above board. I watched him transform from the Don who ruled through fear to a businessman who led through integrity. It wasn't easy. Old habits died hard. There were moments when I saw him want to solve problems the old way, with violence, with intimidation. But he chose differently. Every time. As for me, I went back to university. Luciano funded a scholarship in his grandmother's name, and I became one of the first recipients. I graduated with honors in international business and immediately joined his company as vice president of operations. Not because I was sleeping with the boss. Because I'd earned it. I led the expansion into African markets, using my connections and cultural knowledge to build partnerships in Lagos, Accra, Johannesburg. My first deal was a €30 million shipping contract that made even Luciano's skeptical board members admit I knew what I was doing. But not everyone was supportive. Some of Luciano's family refused to acknowledge me, called me opportunistic, whispered that I was a gold digger who'd seduced their Don while he was vulnerable. Italian high society wasn't much kinder. The racist comments were subtle but cutting. The microaggressions constant. I was exotic. Different. Not one of them. Luciano shut it down hard every time. "Disrespect her," he said at a family gathering where his cousin Maria had made a particularly nasty comment. "And you disrespect me. She's not going anywhere. Get used to it or get out." Maria left. Several others followed. But the ones who stayed became family in the truest sense. Salvatore became Uncle Sal, protective and loyal. Other members of the organization who'd known me as the maid welcomed me as the boss's partner. Slowly, painfully, we built something new. In October, Luciano invited my family to visit. My father, mother, and 2 sisters flew in from DC, skeptical of the Mafia boss, who'd swept me into his world. Dinner was awkward. My father, a retired DC cop, grilled Luciano about everything. His past. His business. His intentions toward me. "I love your daughter," Luciano said simply. "She saved my life and I intend to spend the rest of mine making sure she never regrets it." "Pretty words," Dad said. "But you're a criminal." "I was," Luciano corrected. "I'm not anymore. And if you don't believe me, Detective Ferrara's number is in my phone. Call him. Ask him if I've been involved in anything illegal since New Year's Eve." My father did call. And Detective Ferrara told him the truth, that Luciano Vittorio had kept his word, that every business venture had been scrutinized and found legitimate, that he'd become an unlikely ally in reforming the criminal justice system. By the end of the week, Dad had softened. Not completely, he was too protective for that. But enough to pull Luciano aside and give his conditional blessing. "You hurt my daughter, I don't care about your empire or your guards. I'll make you regret it." "If I hurt her," Luciano replied, "I'll deserve whatever you do to me." They shook hands. It was a start. In November, we launched the Rosa Vittorio Scholarship with a €5 million endowment. Full rides for international students from underrepresented countries studying in Italy. The first recipient was a brilliant Nigerian woman pursuing engineering at Bocconi. I stood beside Luciano at the press conference, watching him honor his grandmother's memory by helping students like me, and fell even more in love with the man he was becoming. That night he took me back to the villa. It had been remodeled, the rooms that held painful memories repurposed into something new. The master bedroom where we'd watched Bianca's betrayal was now a library. The sitting room where they'd planned was now a music room. He led me to the garden where I'd first grabbed his wrist and changed both our lives. Snow was falling just like that December night. "Helena Palmer," he said, dropping to one knee in the exact spot where our story began. My breath caught. "You saw darkness in me and didn't run. You demanded I be better, and I'm trying. Every day I'm trying." He pulled out a ring, simple platinum with a perfect diamond. "Will you marry me? Will you build this new life with me?" Tears streamed down my face. "Yes. 1,000 times yes." He slipped the ring on my finger and stood, pulling me into a kiss that tasted like promises and hope and forever. This was real. This was ours. This was the life we'd fought for. And it was just beginning. The wedding took place on the Amalfi Coast in late March, when the lemon trees were blooming and the Mediterranean sparkled like scattered diamonds. We'd chosen a centuries-old villa perched on cliffs overlooking the sea, a place that felt removed from the world and all its judgments. 200 guests. Carefully curated. Only those who truly supported us made the list. My family arrived a week early. Mom and my sisters helped me choose my dress. Elegant ivory silk that flowed like water, no train, no fuss. Simple and perfect. "You're really doing this," my sister Jasmine said, watching me in the mirror. "Marrying a former Mafia boss." "I'm marrying a man who chose to be better," I corrected. "Who loves me completely. Who sees all of me and stays." Mom's eyes filled with tears. "Your grandmother would be so proud. You followed your heart across an ocean." The ceremony blended everything we were. A Catholic priest and a minister from my family's church in D.C. co-officiated. We incorporated Italian traditions, the confetti, the bomboniere, and American touches. My father walked me down the aisle to a song that mixed opera with gospel. When I reached Luciano at the altar, the look on his face made my knees weak. Like I was everything he'd ever wanted and never thought he'd deserve. Our vows were custom-written, a blend of Italian and English. "Helena," Luciano began, his voice steady despite the emotion in his eyes, "you saw darkness in me and didn't run. You demanded I reach for something better. You are my light, my conscience, my home. I vow to honor you, protect you, cherish you. To build a life worthy of your faith in me. Ti amerò per sempre. I will love you forever." My turn. "Luciano, you chose the harder path because it was right. You transformed yourself, your legacy, your world for love. I choose you not despite your scars but because of them. Because they prove you fought to be here. I vow to stand beside you, challenge you, love you. Always." When the priest said, "You may kiss your bride," Luciano pulled me close and kissed me like we were the only two people in the world. The crowd erupted in applause, but I barely heard it. This was real. This was forever. The reception was magic. Salvatore gave a speech that had everyone crying with laughter, talking about the nobody maid who'd grabbed the Don's wrist and changed everything. My father welcomed Luciano into our family with gruff affection. And when Luciano and I had our first dance, the DJ seamlessly transitioned from Andrea Bocelli to John Legend, and everyone joined us on the floor. We'd broken every rule to get here. Crossed every boundary. But as I swayed in my husband's arms, watching our families mingle and laugh together, I knew it was worth it. All of it. Our honeymoon was split between Tanzania, my choice to see the place my mother's ancestors came from, and the vineyards of Tuscany, his choice to show me the Italy he loved beyond the criminal world. We talked about futures and dreams and all the ways we'd been broken before we found each other. We made love under African stars and Italian sunsets. We healed in ways we didn't even know we needed. And when we returned to Naples, we were ready to build our life together. 18 months later, on a warm summer evening, I went into labor. Luciano, who'd faced down rival gangs without flinching, nearly fainted when my water broke. "Hospital," he said, his face pale. "We need to go to the hospital." "No. Where are the bags? Did we pack bags?" "Luciano," I said, breathing through a contraction. "The bags are in the car. You packed them 2 months ago. And you checked them yesterday. We're fine." "We're not fine. You're in labor." I would have laughed if another contraction hadn't stolen my breath. The hospital was ready for us. Private suite, the best doctors, security posted outside. Being married to Luciano Vittorio had some advantages, even if he was no longer the Don. Labor lasted 12 hours. 12 hours of Luciano holding my hand, whispering encouragement in Italian and English, looking more terrified than I'd ever seen him. Finally, at 2 in the morning, our daughter was born. The nurse placed her in Luciano's arms and he just stared at her. This tiny, perfect blend of both of us. My dark skin, his eyes, a head of thick black hair. Then he started crying. Actually crying, tears streaming down his face. "She's perfect," he whispered. "Helena, she's perfect." "We did good," I agreed, exhausted and elated. We named her Rosa Grace Vittorio. Rosa for his grandmother who'd taught him to be human. Grace for the undeserved favor that had saved both our lives. That first night in the hospital, I watched Luciano hold our daughter, whispering promises to her in Italian. Promises about safety and love in a world without fear. "I'm going to be better for you, piccola mia," he said. "You'll grow up knowing only love. I promise." And I knew, watching him transform from Don to devoted father, that he'd keep that promise. The years that followed were full in the best way. Rosa was joined by her brother Dante James when she was 2, named to redeem the name and honor my father. We bought a house outside Naples with a garden where the children could play safely. Professionally, everything flourished. My African expansion brought in hundreds of millions. Luciano's legitimate empire grew stronger every year. We sat on charity boards together, funded schools, worked on criminal justice reform. We weren't perfect. We argued about parenting styles, about business decisions, about family obligations. But we always came back to each other. Always chose love over pride. My father, who'd been skeptical at first, became one of Luciano's closest friends. They talked politics and watched football and argued about everything, bonding over their shared desire to protect the women they loved. Uncle Sal became a fixture at family dinners, teaching Rosa Italian phrases and spoiling both kids shamelessly. My mother and Luciano's aunt, one of the few family members who'd accepted me, became co-conspirators in planning family gatherings and trying to get us to have a third child. We were building a family. A real one. Based on love, not obligation. 5 years after our wedding, on our anniversary, Luciano took me back to the garden where everything had started. The villa looked different now. We'd renovated extensively, erasing the painful memories and creating new, happy ones. The bedroom where betrayal had happened was now a library where I read to our children every night. The sitting room where they'd planned was now a music room where Rosa practiced piano. But the garden remained the same. Our sacred space. Snow was falling again, just like that December night when I grabbed his wrist and whispered, "Not a sound." 5 years, Luciano said, pulling me close. 5 years since you saved my life. Best decision I ever made. Do you ever regret it? Everything that came after? The trial, the racism, the criticism. I looked at this man who'd transformed himself for love. Who'd built a legitimate empire. Who was the best father our children could have asked for. "Not for a single second," I said. "You were worth saving, Luciano. And I'd do it all again in a heartbeat." He kissed me, deep and sweet, a kiss that held 5 years of marriage and a lifetime of promises yet to be fulfilled. From the house, we heard Rosa's voice calling. "Mama. Papa. It's almost midnight." Dante's smaller voice added, "Come. Countdown." We walked back toward the villa, toward the warmth and light and laughter. Toward our children and our family and the life we'd fought so hard to build. Inside, chaos reigned in the best way. Rosa was teaching my mother an Italian song. Dante was showing my father his new toy cars. Salvatore and Jasmine were arguing good-naturedly about something ridiculous. At midnight, we all gathered with sparkling cider, the kids included, and made a toast. "To family," Luciano said, raising his glass. "To choosing love over fear. To second chances. To the worst moments being doorways," I added. "To walking through them together." Rosa, not understanding but enthusiastic. "To Papa and Mama." Dante, "And cookies." Everyone laughed. Glasses clinked. Outside, fireworks exploded over Naples Bay. Later, after the kids were in bed and our families had gone to the guest house, Luciano and I stood at our bedroom window, watching the last fireworks fade. "Sometimes I think about that night," he said quietly. How close I came to storming in with my gun. To killing them both and spending my life in prison. How I almost missed all of this. But you didn't, I said, lacing my fingers through his. You listened to a maid who had no business giving you orders. You chose evidence over violence. You chose to become someone new. Because of you. Because you wanted to be worth saving. He turned me to face him, his hands framing my face with devastating gentleness. I love you, Helena Vittorio. Every day I love you more. I love you too, I whispered. By dawn. My husband. My heart. We kissed there in the darkness, in the life we'd built from ashes, and I marveled at how something so beautiful could come from something so dark. Because the greatest revenge against those who tried to destroy you isn't violence or hatred or bitterness. It's living. Truly, fully, joyfully living. It's loving hard and building something beautiful and finding joy in the ordinary moments. Bianca had wanted Luciano's death and his money. Instead, her betrayal had led him to a life worth living. To a love that transformed him. To a family that chose him every day. Me. I'd come to Italy running from violence, looking for peace. Instead, I found purpose. Found love. Found a man who chose to be better because someone finally saw him as more than a monster. It all started with 3 words whispered in the December darkness. Not a sound. Those words saved his life. And gave both of us a reason to truly live it. As I drifted off to sleep in Luciano's arms, our children breathing softly in their rooms down the hall, our family safe and whole and happy, I felt something I'd never experienced before. Peace. Real peace. The kind you only find when you've walked through fire and come out the other side holding the hand of someone who chose to walk through it with you. This was home. This was love. This was victory. And it was just beginning. If you've stayed with us until the end of this incredible journey, thank you from the bottom of my heart. This is what the Reina del Inframundo is all about. Stories of deserved love that transcend boundaries, of courage in the face of evil, of redemption and second chances that remind us anything is possible. If this story touched your heart, please hit that like button right now. Subscribe to the channel so you never miss another story of passion, drama, and love that defies all odds. And share this with someone who needs to hear a story of hope today. Maybe someone going through their own dark moment. Someone who needs to be reminded that the worst moments can become doorways to the most beautiful beginnings. Drop a comment and let me know, what was your favorite part? Was it when Helena grabbed Luciano's wrist in the garden? The New Year's Eve exposure? Their first kiss? The proposal? I want to hear from you, beautiful souls. Your comments, your stories, your hearts, they're what make this channel a family. And remember, sometimes the greatest love stories start in the darkest places. Sometimes salvation comes from the most unexpected person. Sometimes all it takes is 3 words whispered in the darkness to change everything. Not a sound. Those 3 words saved his life and gave them both a reason to truly live it. Stay blessed, stay loved, and I'll see you in the next one, beautiful souls. Until then, keep believing in love, keep believing in second chances, and keep believing that you're worthy of your own beautiful beginning.